If you were around when Loser came out, you were just like, what is this sound? I've never heard anything like this before. One of the biggest songs of the 90s almost never happened. No one is paying any attention to him. In fact, they're all going out and they're smoking cigarettes. Beck looks at Carl and he's like, oh my God, I'm a loser. Like, I sound like a freaking loser. He walked in Carl Stevenson's apartment, laid down a track, never saw him again. Music history is filled with carefully crafted masterpieces. Loser was not one of them. Today, I'm going to tell you about how one of the biggest songs of the 90s almost never happened. It was built in a cheap front room of an LA apartment from a throwaway slide blues guitar riff, a forgotten blues beat, and a singer who admitted that his rapping was so bad that he joked that he was a loser before anyone else could beat him to it. That off-the-cuff recording session produced the most unlikely anthem of the decade and launched Beck from obscurity to international stardom. Today, I'm going to tell you about how Beck's Loser came about. And I think there's some lessons in it for all of us. Welcome to Music Daddy. I got a million of these stories. I hope you stick around. Hope you subscribe, because I think you'll like them. So let's talk about Beck. So Beck was born Beck David Hansen in 1970 in a rooming house off of Hollywood Boulevard. His parents were artists. They broke up right after he was born. So that's why sometimes you'll see him referred to as Beck David Hansen. And sometimes you'll see him referred to as Beck David Campbell. Same guy, just sometimes he had one parent's name and the other time he had the different parent's name. He grew up in Pico Union, Westlake. He lived in some really, really bad apartments. In fact, the apartments that he lived in were later torn down so that better places could be built. The area was gentrified because the apartments were so bad, no one wanted to live there. So his mother, whom he lived with, always had problems with money. And so she was always one step away from nothing. And so they just lived where they could. So he grew up in these really super dense apartments, really heavy Latino and Asian populations. And that's why you see a lot of references to the Latino language, to the Latino lifestyle in his songs, like Guero. So, and then of course, on the chorus for Loser, you have the references to Loser in Spanish. So that was a big influence on him. Those are the high schools he went to. That's what he did. But actually, he didn't go to a high school. He only went to junior high. He loved education. But as he said, if he would have went to high school in the Westlake, in the Pico Union area, he said it just wasn't a safe place for him. He knew that it was going to be really tough for him to not get beat up every day, and especially the way he looked and his size. So he decided to quit after junior high, and he became a busker, essentially. He was playing on buses. He was playing on streets. He was doing whatever he could to play his music, and his music was very different. And I have to admit, he was very fearless with his music. He just loved creating different types of music and putting different types of music together. He loved to put blues and folk together with hip hop in his own way and try to get people to listen to that. It wasn't easy. So after he left junior high, became a busker, he went to New York City because he said, well, if I can't make it here, maybe I can make it in New York City where there are more people. So he had $8 in his pocket and he went to New York City on a bus to try and join the anti-folk scene. The anti-folk scene is interesting because what it is it's just taking the principles of folk music and turning it on its head. So the lyrics don't go together. The lyrics are more images than they are stories. And so it's putting disparate types of genres together to create this anti-folk genre. And that was right up his alley, and that's what he did. And it didn't work out. I mean, he met a lot of people in that scene, but he wasn't making any money. So after about a year or two, he decided to come back to LA, as he puts it, because he got tired of being beat up and freezing. And so he came back to LA. Now, when he came back to LA, he still was trying to seek out his musical fortune. So he would go to clubs. Now, he had no pedigree on why he should be playing in the club. And he had no following, so he couldn't get ticket gigs. But what he would do is, in between acts, he would take his guitar and he would just run up onto the stage and start to play. And after that, he didn't get a following, but it gave him experience. It gave him experience. And some of the clubs were like, okay, look, they're going to be running up in here between sets. Maybe we'll allow you a little space where you can play your thing. And, who knows? We'll see what happens. So one of the clubs where he played was a place called Jabberjaw in LA. And this was like a no frills underground club. lo-fi. And it's where actually a lot of big names would play because it had that feel, that indie underground feel. Nirvana came through, Weezer, the Gits, Beastie Boys, the Melvins, all of those folks would come through and play Jabberjaw. So you would get people from the music industry who would go to Jabberjaw because they knew that some hit people would go there and maybe someone on the come up. So he went and he was playing his anti-folk music with Mississippi blues slide guitar, which he really loved. But it was really just an acoustic set, and it was all over the place because remember, his lyrics didn't mean anything. They were just all from here and from there kind of mashed together. And he wasn't big on melody, right? Because it's anti-folk, so he's not big on melody. But he could play the Mississippi blues slide guitar. He had been playing that for a long time, and so he really got good at that. I say that for a reason. So one night he's up there and he's doing his Mississippi blues slide guitar, and no one is paying any attention to him. In fact, they're all going out and they're smoking cigarettes. And so he's like, God damn it, I got to get the attention. So what he decides to do is he decides to subscribe to Music Daddy. That's what he decided to do. Anyway, back there though, what he decided to do was he decided to stomp his foot and start rapping over this Mississippi blues slide guitar. And if you think you've heard this before, yeah, you probably have in the song Loser. And so he starts doing this. And look, no one came back in from smoking their cigarettes. But for the first time, a couple people started listening. And for the first time, a couple people actually applauded. And they were like, hey, you know what? That's not that bad. And so a couple of people applauded. And he was like, okay, well, maybe I got something here. He didn't. He totally, like I said, a couple of people applauded. But it made him feel good. And so he's up there and he's thinking, okay, well, I was doing my thing, and we'll see what happens. But this guy walks up to him. And this guy was a guy named Tom Rothrock. Tom Rothrock, sorry about that. Tom Rothrock owned a label called Bong Load Records. And Tom Rothrock was also a producer. And he was kind of in the music world. He had produced Poison. He had produced other people, engineered. He was big in the engineering world. He engineered a number of albums of people that we know, James Blunt, others. So he was in the industry. He knew music, and he did have a label, Bong Load Records. And so Tom Rothrock comes up to him and he said, hey, I like your rapping. And Beck, who's always the busker, was like, well, yeah, I'm a rapper. And so Tom Rothrock was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm a rapper. He's like, oh, wow. He goes, well, I know a guy that makes beats. Maybe I can put you two together and you guys could see what works. Maybe come up with something and I could listen to it. And Beck, who, again, is trying to act like, he's Mr. Professional Rapper. He's like, oh, yeah, well, what's this guy done? Meanwhile, inside, he's like, oh my God, this might be my opportunity. And so he said, well, he's worked with the Ghetto Boys. At this, Beck just loses it inside because he's like, oh my God, this guy's worked with the Ghetto Boys. Like, I never realized I never worked with anyone who worked with the Ghetto Boys. If you know your hip hop rap canon, you know who the Ghetto Boys are. And so he's like, yeah, okay, let's do it. I'd love to get together with this guy. And so Rothrock called, he put it together. And before you know it, Beck is walking into an apartment in Los Angeles that's being rented by a guy named Carl Stevenson. Now, Stevenson, again, he was a producer, he was an engineer, same type of deal, but he made beats. And this is what he could do for Beck. So he walks in, he's heard Beck's stuff, and he was like, yeah, he goes, I don't like your rapping. Look, I don't like your rapping, but I did like your slide blues guitar. I did like that. That sounded pretty good. And Beck is like, okay. Now, when Beck walked in, he saw a sitar in the corner of the living room of the apartment, and he'd never seen a sitar in real life, or a sitar. Sorry about that. A sitar in real life. And so he kept that in his mind. He's like, okay, well, what do you got? He's like, well, I got this drum beat that I got from a blues musician named Johnny Jenkins. And it's a cut called I Walk on Gilded Splinters. And he plays it. And he's like, oh, that's a good beat. That's a good beat. And that is the beat. That's the basis for Loser. And he's like, okay, that's a good beat. And he's like, okay, what can we put over it? And he's like, well, I like that slide blues guitar thing you do. Can you play that? And it's a very, very basic riff. But Beck was good at it. He was very good at that very basic riff. And so Beck plays it. He plays his slide blues guitar riff, and they lay that over the top of the Johnny Jenkins I Walk on Gilded Splinters drum beat. And so they got something there. And he said, well, we don't have a bass. I don't have a bass here. He goes, well, we can put a bass on the drum machine on the ASR 10. And so he plays a bass on the ASR 10. So it's not a bass per se, but it's the bass sound. And so they create the bass sound. And now what they have the bass sound on the ASR 10. They have the drum loop from the Johnny Jenkins song. And they have the slide blues guitar. And right there, you have pretty much all of Loser. This is Loser as it came to be known. And Beck says, well, hey, man, I'd never heard a sitar in real life. Can you play that? And he's like, oh yeah, let's play it. And so what they did is they just took that instrument and they matched it to the bass. And so the sitar played over the bass notes. And so now you have what became the loser music. And then he's like, well, why don't you do your rap over the top? And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll do my rap. And so Beck had seen himself as Chuck D from Public Enemy. And if you listen to how he raps in Loser, you will see that he's doing that kind of machine gun aggressive rap. And what he was doing was he was just playing a character. He was playing for lack of a better term, a white Chuck D. And he liked Chuck D because he liked the aggressiveness of his flow. And he also liked that Chuck D would create these rap images. It wasn't necessarily a story, but they were images that he would create with his raps. And that's what Beck likes. So he starts imitating Chuck D and rapping over the top. So when they play back and Beck hears himself rapping all those nonsensical verses that he put out there, Beck looks at Carl and he's like, oh my God, I'm a loser. Like, I sound like a freaking loser. And then he was like, oh, well, you know what? Shit. Why don't I beat people to the punch? And so he's like, you know what? Hold it a second. I think I can make something out of that. And so he calls his friend and he asks his friend, hey, how do you say I'm a loser in Spanish? And his friend is like, well, I don't think there's a direct translation, but I think you could say like soy un perdedor, really, which means I'm lost. But Beck just goes with it because listen, no one thought that this was going to be for real. Everybody kind of thought this was for fun at this point because he's in an apartment in LA with a dude he's never met in his life. And they're just putting shit together right on tape from an ASR-10 and a sitar. And so he doesn't think this is going to go anywhere. So he's like, well, I'll have fun with this. I'll just talk about what a loser I am because of the way he sounds rapping. And so he came up with the chorus of Soy un perdedor, I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me? Completely doing nothing more than making fun of himself and how he sounded. So when you hear that song and you hear that chorus, that's just him in that living room making fun of himself because there were no do-overs. He never went back to tape over it or anything. Pretty much the song is what was done in that living room. There were a couple of things that were touched up in the studio, or I'm sorry, by the engineers later. Very, very small though. Everybody associated with that record says the same thing. No, that what you hear is what was done in Carl Stevenson's living room in the apartment. And so that's the chorus, Soy un perdedor, I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me? Again, just completely making fun of himself. After they did that, Beck left. He never saw Carl Stevenson again. That was it. He walked into Carl Stevenson's apartment, laid down a track, never saw him again. About a year later, Tom Rothrock gives Beck a call and he's saying, hey man, I put this song together. I think we might be able to do something with it. It's not that bad. I kind of like the feel. Why don't we go talk to some record labels? And, because I'm a small record label, there's only so much I can do. And so Beck was like, okay, fine. Let's go talk to some record labels. So by the way, at this time, Beck was working at a video store and he was living in an alley in a shed in Los Angeles. So if you drive down the alleys of Los Angeles and like the places where he was living, downtown Los Angeles, Pico Union, where it's very, very crowded, you will see I think a lot of them used to be old garages, but they've kind of become sheds and they're into the alley. And that's where he was living in a shitty little shed in an alley in LA. He was living there, just trying to live, busking and working at a video store. So he's like, yeah, man, let's go talk to people if you think it sounds good. So they talked to a couple of labels and the labels heard it and they're like, yeah, I kind of like the vibe, but let's change this. Let's change that. You are kind of weird. We should probably change something about you, cut your hair, make you dress differently. And Beck really wasn't into it. He's like, look, man, I get it. This could be my opportunity, but I don't want to change the song. Now that I hear the song, I kind of like it and I don't want to change it. I want to leave it how it is. And Tom, who again, he was an indie guy, so he's not going to force him to, bend his knee to power. So Rothrock was like, okay, I get it. That's fine. So that was it. 2 years go by. 2 years go by. And I think Beck has said by this time he had completely forgotten about the song. It's been 2 years since they had that little dog and pony show with the labels and they wanted him to change it. And he told them all, to kind of F off. And so nothing has happened for 2 years. One thing happened though, and that is that Tom Rothrock decided to kind of release it on his own on Bong Load Records. And he did that after 2 years. So we're looking at now it's 92 or late 92, right? And so he releases it on Bong Load Records. Remember, Bong Load is very small. So it's just going to go out to people who college radio stations, independent radio stations. And so he releases it and it's picked up by a guy at a radio station called KCRW. A guy named Chris Dorita has a show, very popular show at that time in Los Angeles with the musicians, and it's called Morning Becomes Eclectic. If you think of the title, you would see how this would totally fit. And so Chris Dorita at Morning Becomes Eclectic liked the song, and he started to play it. And he started to create a buzz in the music industry, because this is the kind of station that people in the music industry listen to. And people start going, oh, hey, that's a pretty cool song. Oh, not bad. Then the monster radio station in LA, they heard it being played on KCRW, and they picked it up and they played it on KROQ. And now the people started hearing it, and the people started calling in to KROQ going, what is that Loser song? We've never heard anything like that. Now, you have to remember, right before this, like just before this, in September of 1992, Radiohead had released Creep. Radiohead had released Creep. And so this kind of put this whole slacker, I'm a creep, I'm a loser, kind of put this whole like image into the music industry at that time, because that was such a huge hit. And even though later on, Beck would say he felt that Creep kind of occupied the space and no one would listen to his song after Creep, it was actually the opposite. People, because they liked Creep so much, now they heard Loser, and from a music perspective, it was just as good. They liked it too. So rather than Creep crowding him out, Creep actually invited him in. And so once KROQ started to play it, now everybody wanted this song, and then it just spread like a freaking foot fungus in a locker room. It just went everywhere. And so radio, now remember, Bongload Records was very small, so they could only print up 500 copies of the record, and everybody wanted it. So Tom Rothrock contacted Beck, and he told Beck, hey, Beck, I think, I don't know how he found him, by the way, but I think they had just kept in touch just in case. But he found Beck, and he told him, look, hey, your song's blown up. And Beck was like, what song? He was like, that Loser song. And Beck was like totally surprised, because he had completely forgotten about the song. Again, it had been 2 years since he last thought about Loser. And so now Tom is like, dude, record labels are calling me. The big guys are calling me. Capitol's calling me. Columbia's calling me. Geffen is calling me. Yeah, everybody's calling me. They want it. They want you. And what happened is, last time when Beck went there, all of the labels were saying, you got to change this, you got to change that, you got to change this. Now that the song was breaking, all the labels were calling Tom Rothrock and saying, whatever Beck wants, whatever he wants, we want him. We will sign him. So there was a bidding war actually for Beck. So Geffen met with Beck. All of the labels met with Beck. Remember, at this time, he's living in a shed in an alley in Los Angeles, working at a video store. No money. So Geffen meets with Beck, and they tell Beck, look, whatever you want, what can we do to sign you? And Beck's like, well, here's what I want. I would like musical freedom. I don't want you guys telling me what kind of music to make. Secondly, I would like to be able to work with other people if I want to. Of course, my primary music will be on your label. But I also would like to be able to work with other people on different labels if I want to. And Geffen is like, if that's what it takes, then you got it. Like, whatever it takes. Because he was in the driver's seat now on signing with a label, that changed his life. Because if he had not demanded that, like if he had gone with the terms as they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he first started meeting with the labels, it would have been very different. Because they would have said, you need to put us another hit, you got to do this, you got to sound like that. Right? Everything he would have done would have had to sound just like the first one. But because he had a bidding war, Beck was able to sign a recording contract that was favorable to him, which is so freaking rare. And that is why he had the freedom to become the superstar that he did. So it was released nationally in 1994, and it hit number 10 on the Billboard charts, and it hit number 1 on the alternative charts. If you were around when Loser came out, you were just like, what is this sound? I've never heard anything like this before, because it was that mix of Mississippi blues slide guitar, this cool drum beat, this crazy rapping that no one had ever heard before. It was a song that no one had ever heard. And it opened the door for a second album, Odelay, which just swept the Grammys, sold billions, and made him a superstar nationally. But that song is what did it. Loser walked so Odelay could run. And what I love about Beck is Beck has continued to change his music and his genres and just completely do whatever Beck wants to do. Music history is filled with carefully crafted masterpieces. Loser was not one of them. Loser was made in a living room between two strangers, putting some crazy stuff together just because none of them thought anybody would ever hear it before. And so it's a lesson that sometimes the moments that change our culture and capture the zeitgeist are simply stumbled upon captured on tape and only recognized as genius after they are eventually heard by the right ears. And that's why I think Loser is such a great lesson in music. If you just keep throwing your stuff out there and you have faith in it, you never know which one of those are going to become the hits. Could be the next Loser. Anyway, thank you for listening. I love these stories. I got a million of them. I hope you join Music Daddy again. I'd love for you to subscribe, tell somebody about it, give it a like, share it. I'll see you next time.